Hello, Dr. Meghana. Tremendous honor to have you on the platform. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Akash. Pleasure to be here as well.
Pleasure listening.
My name is Meghna, and I'm a criminal investigative psychologist. So I'm a private practitioner as of now. I have my own consulting firm in Bangalore. I hold a dual PhD in legal psychology from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden and the University of Portsmouth in the UK. So this was fully funded by the European Commission. So my research was based on investigative interviewing. Yeah, so the right now with my consulting firm, I basically do trainings, consulting, both for legal psychology and mental health
Right.
space. I also am a bit into academia, so I do teaching, I do some
Mhm.
research. So I'm basically like doing a bunch of things. Yeah.
Right. Right. The topic that we are going to talk on today is criminal investigative psychology. So, can you start by asking you what is criminal investigative psychology?
So, criminal investigative psychology, I think I use that term to define the kind of work that I do. It's kind of in line with forensic psychology, legal
Mhm.
psychology. All of these are interconnected terms. So, what I do is I specialize in investigative interviewing, right? So I solely, do this. This is
Mhm.
my expertise, and the active thing that we do with this expertise is basically engage in criminal investigations, suspect
Mhm.
interrogations, things like that, right? Um, so, criminal investigative psychology is again a branch of forensic or legal psychology.
Right.
Yeah, but if I can give you a broader definition of what that means, then I will just use the term legal psychology because that covers everything, all these
Mhm.
other interconnected terms, which is basically using the understanding of human behavior and psychology to anything under the law that
Right.
connects with the law. And that's the broadest definition I can give because
Right.
that that basically covers everything.
Mhm.
Um, Anything that comes under the law, it could be the mental health situation of a person who committed a crime, or
Mhm.
it could be something to do with the will, written by a person
Right.
who may or may not have been, mentally sound at that
Right.
point in time.
Right.
It could be things to do with eyewitness memory, right? So,
Right.
uh, cognitive processes of people. So,
Mhm.
all of these things are psychology related, but when it comes to something to do with under the bracket of law, then
Mhm.
it becomes legal psychology.
Right. Makes sense. So, what is criminal profiling and how do you go about profiling a suspect?
So, criminal profiling is a very overused, popular term. You see it
Mhm.
in every criminal show. You watch any Netflix show, there's some amount of criminal profiling. Um, with my understanding
Mhm.
and a lot of research in the field over the last 4 decades, we have understood that criminal profiling actually is not very scientific,
Mhm.
right? So the idea of criminal profiling, basically for everyone to understand, is um, we basically when we are looking at a crime scene,
Mhm.
right? When we go to a crime scene, the forensics team probably pick up on physical evidences,
Right.
right? Anything left on the
Mhm.
scene, maybe broken pieces of glass, maybe hair, maybe nails, maybe whatever, right? Fiber,
Mhm.
footprints, all of those things, right? What profilers claim to do is they go to the crime scene, look at how the crime scene looks,
Right.
right? And based on that, they try to understand the behavioral aspects of a suspect,
Mhm.
right? So then
Mhm.
they say, um, let's say, for example, they go to a crime scene and it's really messy, right?
Mhm.
Like things are like all over the place,
Right.
everything is fallen apart. Yeah. Then a profiler might say, oh, this person, it probably was in a hurry and probably didn't plan this, properly, and, may not have high intelligence because
Right.
clearly, they left behind a lot of mess. So this is almost, you're predicting something without the scientific evidence backing it.
Mm-hmm.
So profiling, more and more research has gone into it over the last 4 decades, and we have found that it's not very scientific.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's almost like, saying, yeah, well, from based on what I see physically, this is what I think the person could be. Can be
Mm-hmm.
such a can be such a subjective opinion as well sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So it won't be rational. So that is not something I do because
Right.
I know that it's not scientific. But for people who do it, they basically just try to analyze the behavior of
Mm-hmm.
a potential suspect based on crime scene analysis.
Right.
Yeah.
What is the scope of criminal psychology in India?
Um, Currently in India, I think criminal psychology is still in its infancy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it has a long way to go. There's not enough experts in the field. There are a couple of educational institutions providing this as a subject of study for people, and a lot of students go in because they find the subject very interesting,
Mm-hmm.
right? But in terms of profession, of course, you have your government jobs, you have forensic
Mm-hmm.
science labs, you have, your CBI, and maybe a few police stations. The bigger ones take in some psychologists to work with them as rehabilitation specialists and things like that. But in terms of the larger scope of legal psychology itself, there's a lot that has been done in other
Mm-hmm.
countries, and India is yet to catch up. And with that in mind, I think we have a long way to go. So currently, the scope is more, I think, if you were to, of course, pick up whatever we are taught here at this point, and you go and work in a government sector, then you end up doing things. There's like a standard procedure
Mm-hmm.
of sorts, so you kind of stick to procedures and you do things a certain way. I, with my personal, what do you say, or like professional experience, have not been
Mm-hmm.
able to find a sync in terms of people trying to understand the larger picture, all the
Mm-hmm.
latest research, how we can improvise on things. So there's a lot of improvement as well that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, to answer your question simply, because it's in a budding stage, I think it has a growth spurt that needs to
Right.
happen, and that hopefully will happen sooner than
Mm-hmm.
later. But as of today, I think we still have some,
Mm-hmm.
leaps and bounds to jump before we get anywhere with criminal psychology in India. Mostly there's academia and research,
Mm-hmm.
and some practitioners doing certain things within the field, but there's not enough scope yet.
Right.
Yeah.
And if any student wishes to become a criminal psychologist in the future, what steps do they have to take?
So basically, you do a bachelor's. So I'll just give you like an idea of how I went about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I studied, there was just one university in India, giving forensic psychology as a course. So I was limited in terms of my path. But I guess there's a lot more expansion that has happened in the last decade, 12 years. So I can't even remember when I studied. It's been a while. But how I went about
Mm-hmm.
it is I did a bachelor's in psychology, BA, did a triple major,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I took psychology in my master's. Right, so I did a clinical psychology master's.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so I worked in hospitals, internships, and
Mm-hmm.
did that for a bit, and then I applied for this course in what is now National Forensic Sciences University. Back then, it was called Gujarat Forensic Sciences University. So they had this PG diploma in forensic psychology, which was a 1 year course. So I did that specialization, and yeah, and then I worked for a few years, and then eventually did my PhD
Mm-hmm.
in legal psychology. Yeah, so that's how I went about, the track of, getting these degrees in line with what I wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
professionally. Yeah, so that's a pretty straightforward path. So people, even today, irrespective of what university you go to, they of course have more courses in forensic
Mm-hmm.
psychology today. So back then it was just PG diploma, but now they have masters, they have MPhil, they have PhDs. They have all of these available for students to do. Um, yeah, so they have a lot of universities that is giving this as a course as well.
Right.
And the National Forensic Sciences Universities, of course, they're setting up few more branches across the country. But there are also private universities. For example, like I will soon be teaching at Flame University, where they're giving this course at an undergraduate level in the fourth year. You
Mm-hmm.
know, what they call psychology and crime. So that is
Mm-hmm.
a course that will be starting. So there's a lot of universities that are picking it up much earlier than at a master's level. So
Right.
students are already exposed that this field
Mm-hmm.
exists and this is something that they can pursue later if they want to
Mm-hmm.
do. Yeah, so that's basically the track. I answered your
Right.
question.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so do criminal investigative psychologists in criminal trials explain the motives and psychological conditions of the accused as well?
So it depends. I think there's a lot of work
Mhm.
that the psychologists can do. It
Mhm.
depends. It's a very specialized thing. So basically, a lot of criminal psychologists are called in as expert witnesses in court,
Mhm.
right? So depending on the case, yes, they do this, right? They try if they have a very strong clinical
Mhm.
psychology background, right? So then they're able to do assessments on the mental status of
Right.
the suspect, and they're able to give their expert opinion on what a mental status is, how
Mhm.
mentally healthy or unhealthy the person is, and if that could have led to them committing a
Mhm.
certain crime or whatever. So within the field itself, there's so many sub expertises that you can pick up.
Mhm.
So yeah, that is one of the things that they do. They can explain to you what could potentially, based on psychological theories, based on our
Mhm.
understanding of you know um, relationships, attachments
Mhm.
during childhood, how that could have affected a person's growing up years,
Mhm.
behavioral traits, personality traits. So all of those things, they can give an opinion about that. But of course, one thing we need to keep in mind is there are so many subfields within
Right.
that you need to. It's kind of like if we think about it a lot more simply,
Mhm.
um, within the field of medicine, for example.
Right.
For your heart, you have a cardiologist, but if you need a heart surgeon, you can't call a cardiologist, you call
Right.
a
Makes
cardiac
sense.
surgeon,
Yeah.
yeah, or a neurologist or a
Mhm.
neurosurgeon for your brain or nervous system. So different organs in your body has different expertises.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we call different experts who know that specific organ
Right.
in and out. Yeah, so even
Right.
within psychology there's different aspects of mental health or crime or behaviors. So some psychologists are experts in treating mental health issues. Some psychologists are experts in relationship issues.
Mhm.
Yeah, some psychologists are working on developmental issues, childhood issues, sexual
Mhm.
issues, trauma,
Mhm.
yeah, violence, aggression, addiction, right? So depending on your expertise, you get called and you do work based on your expertise.
Right. So could you reiterate your specialization and how can one contact you?
Okay. So basically, I am a criminal investigative psychologist, or you could call me a forensic psychologist, whatever works for you, that is fine.
Mhm.
It's just a terminology.
Right.
So how people can contact me is I'm pretty old school. I don't like social media too much.
Mhm.
But I am available on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Uh, and I think you can share a link
Sure.
in the bio. So people can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can also share a link of my website.
Mm-hmm.
which I'm not sure if I already shared with you. Um,
I'll look into
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah. So I'll share a link to my website.
Mm-hmm.
So, there you can kind of find out the kind of work I'm doing right
Mm-hmm.
now. So we go a little bit into depth of what Forseti Consulting, which is the, independent consulting firm that I'm working
Mm-hmm.
for, working in collaboration with other organizations. That's the kind of work I'm doing. So I'll send the details to you. You can attach that in the bio, and
Sure.
people can just get in touch. They can email me. All the details are on the website and on
Right.
my LinkedIn profile.
Right.
So they can get in touch with me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is there any difference between criminal and forensic psychology?
A little bit, yes. Criminal psychology is
Mm-hmm.
actually a bit more theoretical,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense we go in depth into all the theories of crime, all the psychological theories that's associated with crime. So it's more academic heavy,
Right. Right.
yeah. But forensic psychology is more practice heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about forensics, what do we generally think about? We think about collecting evidence, right? So if you think of a forensics team, they
Mm-hmm.
go, they pick up clues, they pick up evidence and make something out of
Mm-hmm.
it, make meaning out of it. Yeah. So forensic psychologists, at least the major focus in India at this point, is focused more on doing polygraph tests
Mm-hmm.
and maybe brain mapping tests and some really really outdated and unscientific techniques that are still being followed, like the narco analysis, which
Mm-hmm.
most countries abroad have banned because it's against human rights.
Okay.
But yeah,
Yeah.
but that is something,
Yeah.
these are the things that people here do.
Yeah.
Maybe some amount of profiling,
Mm-hmm.
which again, is unscientific. They have other tests, voice stress analysis,
Mm-hmm.
uh, things like this, which I have doubts about, the scientific validity of these tests. But what these tests can be used for is, to get some direction into investigations.
Right.
Like, for example, a lot of crimes do not have clues or evidence
Mm-hmm.
just lying around on the crime scene, right? Criminals are also getting smart. So they know how to wipe clean a crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, uh, having said that, yeah, I think forensic psychologists kind of do these tests and maybe help the police get some direction into,
Right.
how they can proceed. But of course, none of these evidence that you get from
Mm-hmm.
these techniques in forensic psychology are used as primary evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not valid as primary evidence in the court of
Right.
law. They can be used only as an aid to
Mm-hmm.
investigation. So that's basically the main difference between criminal and forensic psychology. Of course, we briefly cover some of these topics of criminal
Mm-hmm.
psychology in forensic psychology, but forensic psychology is more, focused on, becoming practitioners later.
Right.
Yeah.
Last question I would like to ask you. How much knowledge in law do you need to know to become a criminal psychologist?
You do have a few papers, in law that you will be taught during the course.
Mm-hmm.
Some basic stuff. Of course, you don't have to have the knowledge that a lawyer does in terms of all the sections and all the articles. It would be good to know, of course,
Mm-hmm.
because when you for your own convenience, when you
Mm-hmm.
go speak to a police officer, for example,
Mm-hmm.
when you're handling a case, and they throw these sections at you, they
Right.
say, yeah, this case is section so and whatever. You shouldn't be like, what does that mean? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you shouldn't be running back to your textbook and figuring out what that means. It
Right.
would be good to have that at the tip of your tongue.
Right.
So some basic, amount of law knowledge would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not in the depth of lawyers, of course, but
Right.
it's good to know. And of course, you will be taught at your master's level and full level, you will have a paper in law,
Mm-hmm.
some basic understanding of law, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a very surface level law knowledge that you'll
Right.
need.
Right. Thank you so much for your insights. I will stop the recording.
Yeah.